For decades, whispers of the A-Team sent shivers through London's criminal underworld. And no, I am not talking about the television show with the van and the catchphrases. I am talking about the Addams family. 3 brothers from a working-class Irish family in North London who built an empire so vast, so violent, and so deeply embedded in the system that regular police could not touch them. They had to bring in MI5, the same people who handle national security threats and international espionage. That is the level of problem the Addams brothers became. The Metropolitan Police once described Terry Addams as one of the country's most feared and revered organized criminals. A prosecutor at the Old Bailey put it this way: he comes with a pedigree, as one of a family whose name had currency all its own in the underworld, and the hallmark of his career was the ability to keep his evidential distance from any of the violence and other crime from which he undoubtedly profited. They were linked to 25 gangland murders. They tortured people who crossed them. They allegedly helped launder gold from one of the biggest heists in British history. And for 30 years, they walked free while bodies dropped and millions moved through their hands. This is the story of how 3 brothers from Barnsbury became Britain's answer to the mafia, and how it all eventually came crashing down. Terry Addams was born into a large Irish family in Islington, North London, the eldest of 11 children. Growing up in Barnsbury, the streets were his classroom long before any criminal empire took shape. He started small, running protection rackets and shaking down market stall holders for cash. But Terry had something that set him apart from the other young criminals running around North London. He had ambition, intelligence, and 2 brothers who would follow him anywhere. Tommy was known for having a wild streak. Patrick, often called Patsy, could be unpredictable and dangerous in ways that made even hardened criminals nervous. But together, as one former associate later described, they were unstoppable. The thing that made them so strong is that they were brothers who stuck together. While other gangs might have fallings out or disagreements, the Addams brothers were always bonded. It was like if you cut one of them, all the rest would start bleeding too. By the 1980s, the trio had formed what would become known as the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate. But on the streets, everyone called them the A-Team. Their crimes evolved rapidly from simple protection rackets to something far more sophisticated: gold smuggling, drug trafficking, contract killings, money laundering on a scale that required international connections. And here is where things get really interesting. In November 1983, a gang of armed robbers broke into the Brinks Mat warehouse near Heathrow Airport, expecting to find a few million in cash. What they found instead was 3 tons of gold bullion worth £26 million. The problem was, none of them had any idea how to turn that much gold into money they could actually spend. So they reached out to the underworld, and the Addams family answered that call. Tommy Addams was brought in to help move the gold. The family recruited a Hatton Garden jeweler named Solly Nahome to sell the smelted gold through legitimate channels. In 1985, Tommy was actually charged alongside Kenneth Noy for involvement in laundering the Brinks Mat gold. But at trial, he was acquitted. And that right there became the pattern. The Addams brothers kept charged, and they kept walking free. Witnesses mysteriously refused to testify. Key evidence disappeared. Juries returned not guilty verdicts that left investigators stunned. At one point, the family even had a spy inside the Crown Prosecution Service, who was later jailed for passing secrets to their associates. Former associates described how Terry chaired family meetings at his £2 million mansion in Mill Hill like board meetings of a multinational corporation. Every few weeks, word would come down that a shipment had arrived, or someone had hijacked a lorry full of cigarettes or booze. Other criminal firms would bring the goods to the Adams family because they had the contacts to move product quickly and quietly. The Adams brothers made money without having to lift a finger for the dangerous parts. Other crews did the heavy lifting. The A-team took a cut of everything. But make no mistake, when violence was necessary, the Adams family did not hesitate. In April 1997, a Mayfair financier named David Mackenzie was summoned to the home of Terry Adams' brother-in-law. Mackenzie had been laundering money for the family, but his investments went bad, and around £1.5 million disappeared. For 20 minutes, an Adams enforcer named Christopher McCormack went to work on him. By the time it was over, Mackenzie's nose and ear were left hanging by slivers of skin. Blood was everywhere. And yet, despite Mackenzie's blood being found on McCormack's jacket, the jury found him not guilty. Then there was Gilbert Winter, one of the family's most feared enforcers. In 1994, Winter murdered a former British high jump champion named Claude Mosley with a samurai sword. Mosley had been working as a drug dealer for the Adams family and made the mistake of skimming money. Winter plunged that sword so deeply into his back it almost cut him in two. He went on trial for murder at the Old Bailey, but walked free after the main prosecution witness mysteriously refused to give evidence. But in March 1998, Gilbert Winter himself disappeared. He left his girlfriend's house, drove off in her Nissan Micra, made one phone call that afternoon, and was never seen again. The car was found abandoned 3 months later. His bank accounts, credit cards, phone, all went silent from that day forward. According to gangland legend, Winter is buried in the concrete foundations of what is now the O2 Arena. No one has ever been charged. 8 months after Winter vanished, the family's financial advisor, Solly Nahome, the same jeweler who had helped launder the Brinks Mat gold, was shot dead outside his home in Finchley. An assassin on a motorcycle pulled up as Nahome approached his front door and opened fire. The killer escaped and has never been identified. The Metropolitan Police officially linked the two cases. They believed both men had either betrayed the Adams family or knew too much about where the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. By this point, police had been trying to take down the Adams family for years, but normal surveillance was not working. These brothers had spent decades learning how to avoid incrimination. Terry Adams, in particular, had mastered the art of keeping evidential distance, letting others do the dirty work while he pulled strings from the shadows. So the Metropolitan Police made an unusual request. They brought in MI5, the country's domestic intelligence service, normally reserved for terrorism and threats to national security, was now tasked with cracking a North London crime family. That tells you exactly how dangerous the authorities believed the Adams brothers had become. MI5 spent 18 months bugging every room in Terry Adams's home. The conversations they recorded became known as the Goodfellas tapes because they read like dialogue from a gangster film. In one recording, Terry is watching television with associates when he suddenly starts ranting about someone who crossed him. In another, he discusses business dealings while apparently aware he might be monitored, carefully stage managing his words for any potential audience. But the walls were closing in. In 2007, Terry Adams was finally convicted. Not for murder, not for the violence that had defined his empire, for money laundering. Just like Al Capone going down for tax evasion, Britain's most feared gangster was brought low by financial crimes. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to repay £4.7 million in legal aid he had fraudulently claimed, plus £800,000 in prosecution costs. His release looked like a scene from a gangster film. A glamorous brunette arrived at the prison gates in a black Range Rover, while 2 powerfully built men waited nearby in a red Porsche. He returned to a life that, officially at least, was supposed to be more modest. In recent court appearances, Terry claimed to be unemployed and destitute, living off his wife Ruth's income. But authorities were not convinced. When ordered to pay nearly £50,000 in court costs or face prison, he produced the money within hours. Tommy Adams had his own reckoning. In 2017, police bugged a cafe in Holborn where he discussed having debt collectors ferry cash from Manchester to London. Couriers were watched exchanging bags containing thousands of pounds at Euston Station. He was convicted of money laundering and sentenced to 7 years. As for Patrick Adams, his downfall came in the most dramatic fashion of all. In December 2013, he shot a former associate named Paul Tiernan in broad daylight on a Clerkenwell street. Tiernan survived, but Patrick and his wife Constance fled the country. They were eventually tracked down and arrested in Amsterdam in 2015. Patrick admitted to the shooting, but claimed he had acted in self-defense after Tiernan pointed a gun at him first. The most remarkable part of the case was that Tiernan refused to cooperate with police. Despite being shot in the chest, he told investigators nothing. A note found in Patrick's flat, apparently written by Tiernan, declared he was not a grass. Loyalty, even in that world, apparently meant something. Patrick was sentenced to 9 years for causing grievous bodily harm with intent. And then there was Stephen Marshall, who claimed to be Terry Adams's nephew. In 2010, he was convicted in what became known as the Jigsaw murder case. After it emerged, he had disposed of 4 bodies for the Adams family. He received a minimum sentence of 36 years. Today, the empire the Adams brothers built over 3 decades lies in pieces. Terry is reportedly living in a council flat in Bloomsbury, claiming poverty while authorities suspect he still controls significant hidden wealth. Tommy keeps a low profile since his release. Patrick served his time. But the bodies they allegedly left behind, the witnesses who were too terrified to testify, the gold that was melted down and scattered into the legitimate jewelry trade, all of that remains. Media reports credited the Adams family with accumulated wealth of up to £200 million. They had connections to Colombian cocaine cartels, the Russian mafia, and at one point, allegedly tried to buy Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. They ran their corner of London like a corporation with a body count. Compared to them, one observer noted, the Krays were minnows. The story of the Addams family is a reminder that in Britain's criminal underworld, loyalty can make you untouchable until it cannot anymore. They built something that terrified an entire generation of gangsters, that brought MI5 into the fight, that saw witnesses choose prison over testifying against them. But in the end, even empires built on fear have expiration dates. The same brotherhood that made them unstoppable eventually attracted the kind of attention that could not be bribed or intimidated away. And one by one, the brothers who had walked free for 30 years finally faced consequences. The A-Team, as it turned out, was not immune to justice. It just took decades to catch up.